Some folks show up. Welcome tonight. One quick announcement for everyone's benefit. On Monday of this week, the town council unanimously voted to agree with our recommendation on the hiring of consultants. So that was good to put behind us. And so we're through with the selection process officially. So we have, I guess, Christine, you're probably determining the role as we speak, so we don't have to make that time-consuming thing.
Right.
First up is consideration of minutes of March 13. Any questions or feedback?
Move approval.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Is there a second? Okay, I saw Bill in for seconding. Those in favor? It's unanimous among those present. Bridget, do you want to officially welcome our guests?
Sure. I didn't plan anything fancy, but we have our new consultant here. Said, hey, we haven't quite made it official with town council, but can you come anyway? And they said yes, but everything is official now. And we have Paul and Christian here. If you want to jump in and take it from there, do you want us to zip around the room real quick?
That'd be great. We can start and then we'll zip around. And we're not guests now, we're family, because we're gonna spend a lot of time together, so it makes sense. Christian, you want to start?
Yeah, Christian Roman. I work under Paul at the Greater Portland Council of Governments, as you know. I live in Portland, and I'm really excited to be working with y'all.
Paul Johnson, I'm the Director of Economic and Community Development at the Greater Portland Council of Governments. I live in Scarborough. I resigned my position at the Scarborough Town Council to take this position 3 years ago. For the 4 years I was in council, we were in the process of the comprehensive plan. So I have experienced it from both sides, so to speak. So I understand and respect the perspective of committee members, and I look forward to working with all.
I'm Steve Moriarty from 12 Oak Street. I'm the chair of the committee.
My name is Katie Magoon and I am, we live on the port side.
Lamar Vincent on Range Road to Center Cumberland, and I'm also on the school board and on the town Land Conservation Commission and Sustainability Committee. So my fingers in a number of different pies in town. So hopefully we can bring all those perspectives to help us get this done.
Hey, I'm Nancy McBrady. I live with my family in Portside. First time doing something within the town in this manner, but it's been really informative so far. I'm glad to have you aboard. Sorry I'm late.
Bill Paul, I'm a kid here. In 2007 as well. So for a long time resident, I was on with Peter and Steve maybe, but it's here for a while. So
I'm Meg Helmy. I live over in West Cumberland. This is my first time as well doing something like this. So excited to be part of the process.
Kathy McDonald, representing West Cumberland and also a lifetime resident. And I'm on the Historical Society as well.
I'm Evan Sweetser. I live in the center and of interest, I'm also a transit planner. So.
I'm Christina Silverman. I'm staff. I'm the administrative assistant for code planning and assessing. I grew up here in Cumberland, but I live in Portland right now.
Hi, I'm Lorraine Vernon, live here in Cumberland. I think I'm Cumberland Center, but I'm a mile after. I think I'm Cumberland Center. And I'm also on the planning board.
Peter Bingham, 19 Brook Road, Planning Board Chair, and this is comprehensive plan number 5 for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Josh, you want to go?
Hi, Josh Stearman, live in the Port Side.
Josh is also on Lands and Conservation Commission. Bridget Perry, town planner. I live in Cumberland as well, so resident planner.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. we can jump into the slides, and we'll give you some context. First of all, again, thank you for your trust and faith in us. It's much appreciated. I will say this, as Bridget referenced, it's happened pretty quickly for us, so we have catching up to do. And you have our commitment to continue to catch up and meet you guys where you are. But we jumped at the opportunity to get this started early because I know you've met 3 times, maybe 4 times, and I know what it's like to want to start moving forward. So hopefully when we leave tonight, we can feel like we've moved forward a little bit, at an appropriate pace. Bridget, are you doing slides?
Yeah, I can if you want. That's
If you just stand.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Arrow.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry. It's so formal, I'm gonna say, I'll say that.
don't worry, the microphone's off.
Okay.
You are being recorded.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fine. We never go anywhere and assume everybody knows exactly who we are. So if you know exactly who we are, sorry. If you don't know exactly who we are, I'm going to attempt to explain it. We are the Greater Portland Council of Governments. I'm going to work from the bottom up. Number one, we are a membership organization. So your town, Cumberland, pays us as an entity about $2.25 per capita every year in your budget to be a member of the Greater Portland Council of Governments. In return, we provide regional planning services. We provide lots of ad hoc services depending on what is needed around the area. And we also do lots of collective purchasing for things like road salt, some software solutions, some data collection. We are we're a one-stop shop, so to speak. If staff or elected officials say, hey, I wish we had this, but we have a little bit of a gap in staff, a lot of times call us. We also have a resilience fellowship program right now where we actually have fellows embedded into towns. Do you guys have a fellowship in Cumberland?
No, Yarmouth does.
Yeah. So it's another way of adding to the essentially staff horsepower of some of our communities. So number one, we're a membership organization. Number two, we're what's called an economic development district. That is the Economic Development Administration has deemed us the agency that is responsible for doing what's called the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, which is a 5-year document. And I won't bore you, but it's essentially a comprehensive plan for Cumberland County in the realm of economic development. I co-authored that last year. It's available on our website. I'm sure there's going to be some synergy where we might pull in some of the work that we did. But GPCOG is considered our economic development district. We're a regional planning council, which means lots of the transportation funding, and a metropolitan planning organization. I'm sure you've heard of PACS. If you haven't, lots of federal and state dollars funnel through GPCOG to help allocate transportation, transit money. We don't determine where it goes. We facilitate it. We organize our communities. We give our best recommendations to the power that be, and then we hopefully attract funding into the area. Speaking of funding, we also do lots of grant. We chase after federal and state funding on behalf of our members and other programs. And we do contract work like this. We hope to be something, when we come in and respond to these, A, we hope to be cost effective, and B, we hope to have a built-in regional perspective and a local perspective. So it's not, we're close to home. We don't apply to RFPs outside of our territory. Who we are. This is a neat slide because the darker it is, the more you're going to see that person. So if you look in the top left-hand corner, you see being Christian. We are the faces that are going to show up to your meetings every other week. So Christian and I will be here every other week. Maybe just one of us with a replacement if family matters take hold, but we're your contact. So if you have any questions or if it's through Bridget or through the chair, please email Christian and I. We're the two people driving this cart, so to speak, for GPCOG behind the scenes and with you. We'll be at all the public outreach. We'll be at your town meetings. We will help you lead those. The people to the right, Rick, Lucy, and Hazel, that's our data team. So there's lots of boxes that we have to check. And there's stuff that has to be in our comp plan. A lot of it's data oriented. In the back end, we can do a lot of that preparation for you and with you. And you might not see Rick, Lucy, and Hazel as much, but a lot of their work will be in the final product. Of course, as a committee, you'll review it and help us steer what will be in there. But some of the boxes we just have to check as an order of state statute. Demetra and Clara are both part of my team. Demetra does economic development directly under me, and Clara works in our broadband department. She's our sole person working on broadband. And she often attends if we need more person power for public outreach. If you have a charrette that we might hold and we expect 40 or 50 residents to come out, it won't be just Christian and I. We'll staff up for certain nights that we know are gonna be lively and crowded. And I won't bore you with the rest, but you can essentially assume those are all communications, transportation planners, land use planners. And then down this top bottom right corner, Christine is my boss, so if there's any complaints, just email Christian and everything will be fine. So this is what Christian and I are just trying to acclimate ourselves to with our time with you guys today. I know these are just big open-ended questions, that there's no doubt that you've spent time talking about it informally and informal process of where are we, where do we go, how do we get there? We all know sometimes there's times that we're spinning our wheels, or we might feel like we've been in neutral for a meeting or two. But if we can keep the driving force as a disinterested third party, this is like our goal for you as a committee, is to just continue driving to these three questions. Those are the questions the comp plan should answer. And hopefully, as residents, this is your plan, not Christian and I. We are indifferent how this comes out. Success to us is if the answer to all these reflects the will of the council, and probably more importantly, the will of all the residents. So with that, I will give it to Christian for a minute.
This is going to be repetitive for some of you, hopefully brand new for some of you, maybe somewhere in the middle for the rest. And so if there are any questions or comments or gasps, like feedback is welcome, questions are welcome throughout. But we just sort of wanted, as Paul said, to do some expectation setting for our first meeting, acknowledge how we think about the process and how we're coming into the Cumberland comprehensive planning process sort of now at the beginning of it. So there's sort of two tracks that meet. And this is in large part because of the requirements for comprehensive planning that are set down by the state. So the state has a series of checklists and requirements and statute that says explicitly what should be in a comprehensive plan, exactly how they review it. And essentially all of those things are broken up into topic areas of, agriculture and forest, water resources, historical resources, population and demographics and economy. And very reasonably, it says, hey, you have to look at all of these areas and you have to sort of consider them and then answer some core questions about them and identify policies that are going to say how you're going to deal with them moving forward. So that's sort of like one process that the state says thou shalt do, and they will review it, sort of on their criteria, which we'll get into. We actually have some suggested reading for the next meeting, which we'll get into at one of the later slides. I do not in any way, shape, or form want to minimize that first process because it is very important and it is a tremendously good way to get a sense of where your community is at so that you can acknowledge, as Paul said, where you want to get to and how you might get there. That being said, the data and inventory sort of just like slogging through, I think maps are great. A lot of you hopefully do as well, but there's a lot of just chunking through for that first process. And I think where communities get really, really excited, and maybe we can get a bit more of a hook in terms of interest and enthusiasm, is sort of the broader community vision, a little bit less mandated by, looking at the data and saying exactly what is your desire, your hope, your vision for the town of Cumberland. Comprehensive plans essentially are the basis for zoning for the state of Maine. And so one thing that the state explicitly says, thou shalt create, I don't think they use that language exactly, but it's pretty dramatic, is a future land use map. Not as explicit as zoning. Zoning is sort of what grows out of that, but specifically determining what areas should be preserved and what areas should be like growth areas. Those are pretty chunky, sort of imperfect ways to describe growth and development, but even just coming down to one or the other of those, if you're talking to neighbors, if you're thinking about your own neighborhood, they're actually pretty meaty questions. And so being able to say, we know we want to grow here, we know we want to preserve here, and maybe we're somewhere in the middle here. There's, again, no wrong answers, but it's an important discussion that from which hopefully your future zoning and capital improvements will flow. Paul and I also want to make sure that above the sort of state mandated, thou shalt protect, water resources, thou shalt consider historic resources, that as you are identifying a vision for Cumberland, that we are proactively keeping an eye out for what policy improvements might help you get there. That's partly our role as your comprehensive planning consultants, and partly as our sort of personal interest as your membership organization. We want to make sure that the town of Cumberland is proactively pursuing policies that will help you achieve your vision. So towards that, there are two things that I think are particularly near and dear to Paul's and my heart. One is just digging into, there's a ton of data that already exists as to what Cumberland is and how it got to be how it is today. One of the things that has probably been the most analyzed and poured over in your town's history is the zoning documentation, or is the zoning map. And so, and the zoning policies, I should say. Often they're really, really dry. Often they're not a lot of fun to go through, but they fundamentally shape how the town develops and what can and cannot happen within it. And so we are going to spend a fair amount of time over the near future just reading through your existing zoning code. And that's mostly just so that that's not to say that you all don't already know it A to Z. I assume you do. You can like quote it chapter and all of the different sub chapters and headings. Just kidding. I hope you don't. But it's to say that we're going to be digging into that so that as we move along, we can at least say, if somebody says, hey, wouldn't it be great if Cumberland was more or less X or Y or Z, then we can say, FYI, your zoning doesn't say that. So we just want to make sure that we have a good centered base for moving forward. The other thing is a cost to serve model. And so this is something that Paul's been working a lot with towns in our area. And it's essentially to say, give us the data that you have on existing developments in town, and we will sort of process what the tax burden is on that. And that's because different development styles in different places with different policies and contexts have different outcomes towards a tax base. And so I think there is often a pretty conventional narrative regarding what kind of development is good for a town's budget or bad for a town's budget. And that doesn't always hold up. And so it does in different contexts. It just sort of depends on the context, but that's why we're going to dig in. That's a process that Paul is going to be much more, leading the charge on, so we can answer more specific questions about that later. Again, hopefully you are a representative sample of the town of Cumberland. And there are other layers, past you all. There's the planning board, which we have representation from, the city council, which we have representation from. Hopefully with those multiple layers of representation, Paul and I are going to get a pretty good sense of the will of the average, Cumberland resident. And we can reflect what we are hearing back to you so that you can gut check it and say, whoa, 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 you got that all wrong, or yeah, that's on the right track. That being said, a comprehensive plan for the community would mean nothing if it wasn't actually brought to the community to say, hey, like, what do you guys think? Is this on the right track? So we, at the moment, and we'll get into the timeline, our sort of rough timeline in a few slides, but we are planning on doing 6 sort of formal public engagement events, just to really like check in with folks along the process. And so roughly the way that we've broken those up to think about and plan, which will be influenced by you all, and which you can certainly steer in a different direction, is just checking in on identity and vision once we've sort of laid the groundwork with you all on that. Identifying like what the topics that folks really are passionate about and want to get engaged in past like the sort of required checklist. And then actually coming back with the close to finished plan to say, does this reflect the will of you as a Cumberland resident? So speaking of that timeline, this is sort of how Paul and I are thinking about getting our heads around the various things that we're going to be thinking about, and hoping that you all will, will help us get there, or vice versa. So needless to say, the first thing that we want to do, and I was alluding to this earlier, is just think about where the town is now. And so there is already a comprehensive plan that in, I think, 2014, and then it got updated sort of in 2015, that exists for the town of Cumberland. A ton of the archaeological resources, water resources, a lot of the sort of data portions of that are still going to be true. History of Cumberland still will be the same up till the last 10 years. So there's a lot of stuff that we can build off of, and we have absolutely no desire to recreate the wheel. We want to sort of thoughtfully make sure that it is integrated into the new plan. That being said, I think we also try and take an eye towards what will result in the most useful document that people can find helpful and engaging. And so sometimes I think there's a bit of a battle between why don't we put this in, and is that bringing value to this final plan? Will it help somebody get through and understand Cumberland better? So that's where Paul and I are going to be spending the next month and a half, just with our eyes and ears and hearts and souls in Cumberland's existing documents to make sure that we understand where we're coming from, and so that we can check in with you over the next little while. I acknowledge the state's role with sort of specifying what data needs to be included in the plan. There are sort of 2 parts to that. One is just a general set of data that the state maintains that is available on the website. I actually have a link a few slides later that you can sort of get baseline data on a ton of the topics that the state says, again, thou shalt deal with this in your comprehensive plan. There is another set of data that the state actually compiles and sends to Cumberland and says, hey, this is some of the specific data that you'll need to deal with certain topics. I believe the timeline that they're planning on delivering that is like by the end of April. So obviously there's plenty of stuff that we can get started on and be moving forward with and understanding and discussing and processing. But there's a bit of a wiggle in that regard until the point that we have all of the state sanctioned data, but it's coming soon. And not to make it sound better or worse or more or less fun than it is, but it's just a lot of stuff to go through. So I think we're going to need to proactively and thoughtfully move forward and make sure that we're all getting reasonable takeaways from that. Spread throughout, where once we get our sea legs under us, we're going to want to be proactively reaching out to the community, make sure that folks are feeling involved and apprised of the situation. And sort of, again, as soon as we both have our sea legs under us and a pretty good sense of different chunks of the plan, the data, the will of you all and of Cumberland, then we can start sort of methodically organizing this document together. Again, we have I think, professional passion for making documents be as accessible as possible. So we are not going to try and make it be more exhausting or long or slogged than it needs to be. That being said, comprehensive plans are often with appendices and data like 185 pages or something. So there's about 30 of that, like that is the real meat of the plan that folks get really, really jazzed and excited about. And then 150 of that is sort of the data appendices. So I'm sure there will be some among us who will want to dig into every, data appendix, whatever the singular of appendices is. But we also want to make sure that a community member who is not as invested in the process as you all, which is to say thank you all for your investment in this process. It's incredible. We really appreciate it. That they can dig in to the first 30 pages and sort of get a sense of where Cumberland is going in the next 10 years and how they're going to get there. And then obviously it will need to be vetted by the planning board and then the then the city or town council. And hopefully we'll all have done a great job and it'll sail through that. Just another way of visualizing that, obviously there's twice monthly meetings. We're going to discuss a little bit more about some of the nuts and bolts of that moving forward. The planning board and the town council, other than our representatives here and any sort of proactive check-ins, you all are steering the ship until the very, very end. So we don't have to worry about that quite yet, but it's always worth keeping in mind. And then the way we've envisioned it preliminarily is simply for the first third of the process, 2 check-in meetings with the public, in the middle, 2 check-in meetings, and at the end, 2 check-in meetings for firm public engagement.
And I'll just add, if the committee decides it needs to be 3, it'll be 3. If the committee decides it needs to be 4, it'll be 4.
Yeah, you all are.
We're the boss here, so these are what we're bringing to you. I think this was in our proposal that we submitted to you, but this is all where we're coming from right now. We fully understand we're at the will of the committee.
That's all of that together. It's a little overwhelming when you look at it in one thing, but it hopefully makes a lot more sense. And again, all of this is open to influence by you all and direction by you all. I alluded to previously some suggested hoped for homework for the next meeting. And I apologize. I think Paul and I will almost never ever put this much text on a slide, and preferably without an image or even with an image. We don't like that. But we wanted to make sure that there were multiple ways that you could get to this document. I can follow up with an email to the committee with easy links. But essentially, there were 2 things that to some of you, these will be second nature, and to some of you might be completely new. And either way is fine and great. One is the Growth Management Act from the state of Maine, which literally says, towns are empowered to plan for their future, and how they want to grow and develop. And from that stems all the regulations about what a comprehensive plan needs to include. There is, again, you can navigate to it online. We can send you a link, et cetera, et cetera. The second part is the way that the state actually, the rule that the state follows to say, is your comprehensive plan in accordance with the rules and regulations? That's a 50-page document. It's kind of dry. There's a lot of definitions, but it is helpful to look at and say, what are we being judged against? There are slightly more palatable ways of looking at it. There's an optional checklist that you can literally go through and deal with, but I think it's helpful to have a familiarity with these sort of core documents early in the process so that we can all be on the same page. You don't have to read them word for word, but if you have the chance to skim them, that would certainly be appreciated so that we can, just start from the same page and answer any questions if they come up.
Yeah, and to build on these links, the slides are posted on the agenda on our website page. Linked here, and you should be able to click right in there. If you open a PDF online, click the link. But we can, if it's easier, we can send out an email with links.
For folks' convenience, I didn't want to do it ahead of time because but for folks' convenience, immediately or shortly after this meeting, we can send out a sort of comprehensive email with these 4 links. And so these ones are, they're not that any of the reading is required reading. They are hopefully more helpful and also a lot more engaging. Again, you might already be aware of some of these. The first is the Guide to Comprehensive Planning for Maine Communities that the state put out in 2005. And it's just like a really nice document that says, hey, you're doing a comprehensive plan. This is roughly what you can expect and how you might want to do it. So just a really helpful, like plain language, not statute and ordinance-y stuff, talking about data and the lessons we can learn from it and how the outcomes. The second is maybe a little bit more exciting, hopefully for some of us. And that is sort of the state resource for just like general data that you can start digging into that ties into some of the topic areas that we have to address in the comprehensive plan. So again, we're going to have a more thorough data package that the state is compiling for us. So we won't have everything there, but for the folks that like want to sort of dig in and start clicking around and thinking about, what's in our community, it's a good start. And I will pass it back off to Paul.
I think I only have one slide, so if you want to stay up.
I suppose I will.
Yeah. Yeah, you still will see. So just from this is just an example of how we're going to make the suggestion for today, which you can fully reject or delay or what have you, is from looking at the last 3 minutes and from engaging with us. You're a large group, you're 18 people and you're meeting very often. So just as people looking at the process moving forward, we'd recommend 2 things to consider. Discuss today the endorsement of subcommittees. We might, you don't necessarily have to title those subcommittees, but does subcommittees make sense? And number 2, a schedule where it actually alternates, where we would call the first or the second Thursday. Do you guys do second?
Yeah, second, fourth.
Okay, we do the second Thursday of the month would be working with your subcommittees. The 4th Thursday of the month would be these full committee meetings. So what that would allow us to do would have quote working days, and then they would have convening days. So just from looking at the process, looking at the task you have in front of you, that would be one of the recommendations. On the working days, we might bring an extra staff member. You get to know us more. You actually move some of these, sections of the document forward. So that is just one of those things. I don't like to come to these meetings and not have a next step. If my suggested next step would be that. And so I just put that in.
Some of the subcommittee models you've seen used elsewhere.
For the comprehensive plan?
Yeah, I mean, what would subcommittees potentially be in your?
Oh, yeah, fair. I mean, we could have so there could be a sustainability, resiliency subcommittee. There could be economic development subcommittee. There could be certainly an engagement subcommittee if people are more prone to we need as much input. I know surveys, you're on the right. So there could be a survey subcommittee. Those are and by the way, those working subcommittees, in my opinion, those could shift, right? We could feel like we're in a good spot with the survey committee. We freed up some working hours. We could create another one as we go along. But my suggestion, like with 18 people, if we had 4 or 5 around different tables and Christian and I and a staff and Bridget floating, it will just help us move the needle for you. Ultimately, I think, you could also look at your previous comp plan and take the sections and say, okay, this section we know is going to either need the most updating or, it doesn't feel the best. So that's a subcommittee, right? And so I think that's stuff that you guys could choose as a committee. But just as a workflow wise and feeling like, hey, I'm showing up twice a month and we're getting there, that would be just, and our hope is to always offer those to you. And then if you reject them, then you reject those insights and we move on. But that would be, we wanted to show up today with, hey, what can we do that's not just introductory? This would be it. So there'll be time for you guys to discuss, everything else. So I'll just leave that for you guys to ponder for the next couple minutes. We do have a couple of exercises for us to understand your perspectives more. I'm wondering, I'll preview it just so you
Don't have to stand up.
So number 1, point out your neighborhood and what you like about it. One of the challenges. I'm worried that with all of us, and you've probably done this before, I'm worried that itself might take an hour and a half. So I think what I'll do in the interest of time is we will table this part. And if we want to come back to it at the end of the meeting, I'm more than welcome to do so. I'm more than happy to do so. If not, we can just move on. But this has been a 40-minute process so far. So what I don't want to do is take up too much of everybody's time. So just know that we have some of those just for us. I know where you guys are personally. And then we also have the second one. If you notice your vision statement from 2009, 2014, as a reader of your vision statements, I was there. Those are different. Those are different. There is some deliberate, there's some deliberate word changes in those two. And, you know, which one, what are your thoughts on those? Are you 2009? Are you 2014? Are you 2025? Like, where's your camp, so to speak, in your brain? So again, I'm mindful of the time, and I'm worried that with such a large group that itself will take an hour. So I'll defer to the chair, but, so I think we'll conclude there, and I'll let, we're staying for every meeting the whole time, so we'll conclude this part of our time.
And I think specifically, we had noticed that there was discussion of potentially a community survey, and so we wanted to make sure that there was plenty of time for that. Yeah, a pretty meaty topic.
And I think before we yield all the time, if there's any questions of us personally or how we operate, I think now's a perfect time. I'm sorry, Steve, go ahead. Yeah.
The question about the survey, do you have we'll call it a template that you have used for other communities that we can use as a beginning point?
We have a variety of outreaches in different contexts for every different community that we've been in. Like, I guess I don't think of a comprehensive planning, sort of survey. I think of what are the questions that the committee has decided is really, really, really important to get out, and how can Paul and I help you hone those things down? Because in our experience, if you have sort of a template of these are the X number of questions, it can start to feel a little bit like box checking, a little bit like homework, and also sometimes you get more information, but you don't necessarily get information that leads to decision-making outcomes. Like, you might know the thoughts of a Cumberland resident or their experiences, but it might not be as clear as to, is there an action item that can be taken from it? So we have a ton of so one of the teams up there that Paul talked about early on was the engagement team, and we're going to be leaning on them heavily. Paul and I have done a lot of outreach. So there are always resources that we're going to be building off of. But I think I speak for us both when I say we would strongly encourage you to determine what the questions that you really, 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 really need, like what the universe of information that you really, really need is, so that we can craft policies and make suggestions through the comprehensive plan and sort of build that community survey up around that vision. So yes, we can give you a suggested bunch of things, but that was my editorializing on really, really being strategic about that.
I'm going to pivot pretty hard. I can give you two actual community surveys that went really well in other communities, right? So to be clear, not about the content, but maybe about the structure, right? So some of those threshold questions, do we rank them in order of importance? Do we rank them in yes or no, right? So my homework for you guys is I'll follow up with at least two. I might have three, but I'm going to promise two. I'll give you two. But to Christian's point, we're not endorsing what it's asking, right? That's for you guys to decide. But I'll give you two that worked really well. And that's from looking at, I perused your 2022 results, right?
Yes.
Right. So I certainly I looked at that and said, yeah, we could do that better. Like, not the content. We could probably do the process. So I'll give you guys the templates and let you guys, and to the subcommittee group, that's a good example of, you can kick that to a subcommittee, take the South Portland outreach and say, okay, I hate that, I love that, I love that. And then that gives us a starting point. But always following on what Christian was trying to say is not our role, but we will give you a tool to look at. And if you throw them all three away, that's cool too, but we got some.
Okay.
Yep.
Other questions? Josh?
A quick comment and a question. So I appreciate the discussion of the zoning map as the core of this.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, we've all read it and we get it, but you're the professional planners. So I just put out for the group, I wonder if it might be a good use of time to have you walk us through it for a portion of the meeting, to get your perspective on it. Just put it out there for thought. My question is, so as I'm trying to think about the framework for how to approach this, the work to me doing a document, I want to think about what's the audience for the document. And we have this inherent tension between creating a philosophical statement, what we believe, versus writing for the state reviewing grant applications. I guess ultimately it's kind of both.
Yeah.
But do you encourage one mindset or the other, or is that not a helpful framework?
I think so first question first is, to be clear, I'm not a planner, Christian's a planner. So I will be, Christian, if that's our homework where we can put it on the agenda that Christian walks through for 45 minutes in a similar presentation, we can absolutely do that. So I'm not, so I just want to, I'd be terrified. But to answer your question, I think that's your decision. But I do think this process in its purest form is always going to lean towards more of the philosophical, right? And so I guess the secret about a comp plan is, it's like a lot of other larger plans is you could go and hammer it out with the right people and check the boxes and it'll probably get approved by the state. I'm not trying to be flip, but that's a reality, right? And so I think it's totally natural for a group of 18 residents and the citizens to be way more concerned with the philosophy behind it, right? So that's just my observation, right? I think every town has experienced, we have a comp plan, we have 5 years of political turnover, something comes down the line and half the town says, but it's in the comp plan, and half the town says, I don't know what a comp plan is. And then we're all stuck there, right? And if we can somehow look ahead to that 5-year mark and say, hey, how could we actually facilitate that future conversation and solidify that this is really where we wanted to go as a town and we still do in 5 years, then I think that we've done our job. So I hope that answers your question, but it won't surprise me if our time together is more on the philosophical time.
That's helpful. I don't think we want to get into a crystal ball exercise, but that's helpful. Very helpful.
What's GPCOG's ability to host virtual online rooms? And by that, I'll give you a very specific example. Maine DOT, when they're doing some of these projects over the interstate, they're like, you can log into it's not live.
Yeah.
It's a passive conference, and you can look at plans and you can public comment that way. And I found that really effective. I really like that as just a towns member. Easy to get caught up with what's happening and leave public comments. So I would love to probably use that in this project. So I don't know if that's something that you guys host or if the town of Cumberland has that ability.
Yeah, I think it'd be a combination of you're building out the website, and if it means it redirects to our site for that particular exercise, I think that if the committee chooses that's a way we want to solicit public input, I think that's great. Right. So that's totally part of the outreach, right? If our outreach is, we can, if anybody's ever used the Loom app where, you have a little circle and it's me and I'm giving a little update of the comprehensive plan, right? And you can watch that passively and leave comments. And then you could also have, the PDF where you could leave invisible comments on. So only, us on the back end can see them, or what have you. That's all very easy for us. I think the big thing would be, do you make it completely live on the website that Cumberland does, or do you just have it redirect to us and ask us to deal with it? But that's totally, we can just, so the answer is yes, and we would hammer out the logistics if we chose that's part of the engagement.
Yeah.
Which for the record, I think would be good.
Yeah, I would just, from my professional experience, comment to the rest of the committee is I've been working on a lot of bus network redesigns. And so these are big cities with lots of people, lots of opinions, and have a live GIS map where people can go in there and they can make a comment about their bus stop or their bus or what they like or they don't like. And it's, other than going through all the comments, putting them in the buckets, which I don't like doing, is a great tool and it's very effective. So that was just my opinion.
And some of the cost to serve stuff we have is pretty wild. It has broken down by census tract, interactive GIS map that will click and tell you how many road miles it is, how much does a kid cost in that part of the town. We can couple that with the process you're saying, which we're not doing right now, but you just kind of, now I'm geeked up about seeing if I can make that happen.
I'm just curious, do you guys or anyone on the team have any sort of change management awareness and background at all, or, I'm just saying because I have been on a committee before for the town, and one of the things that I think is the most challenging about moving forward with any of these big ideas or big thoughts or changes in direction is that it's a change, and as humans, we're just naturally resistant to that. Unfortunately, for those of us who are trying to enact some change. So I guess I'm just curious, because I can say that I think everyone would be in agreement that this town tends to resist change.
Do you want to go first or second?
Well, you worked for the city of Portland, so your whole life's been change management up until now, right? So.
Fair. Yeah, so that.
I just handed that to you? Yeah.
That was nice. I would say, not by that name, I think by experience, certainly. That being said, later on, I'm going to be furiously Googling, change management and sort of, 101s. So I think that's a perspective that Paul and I come from, and in an effort to volley it back over there, especially in this experience as a counselor. I think that, sort of bringing people from one point to another is, that was sort of his bread and butter. So professionally experienced history wise, yes, I think we're very in that camp. But again, do I have a certificate from it or something like that? Have I? That's some of the homework that I'm going to be doing.
And I'll have your certificate. So I have experience in change management and a certificate in organizational development, which is basically change management. So.
Well, and I'm just gonna echo what Katie was kind of hitting on, and I think, when we had the guests from Yarmouth, the, comprehensive plan, and they talked about the implementation committee, so they took it one step further. It wasn't that we all get together, we write this document, it gets approved, and then, go forth to great things, Cumberland. I think that that's the step that probably we've been missing, is how do we actually now go, okay, we have this great plan. How do we manage it and the change and make sure that things are actually happening within the town based on what the comprehensive plan says?
Other questions? Well, I think at the very minimum, at this stage, we need a survey subcommittee. Because that's step number one. First, fall, complete the survey, and then very soon after, we get it out to the public. We would determine what the recommended timeframe is for between issuance and deadline and so forth, and then get those back and assessed and analyzed and so forth to our benefit. So people generally agree that that's a good subcommittee to have. It's not one that's going to last beyond the issuance of the survey and receipt of the results, because you accomplished your mission by that. So anyone who wants to be on it will then be free to take their talents and look at the subcommittee. Bill.
Yeah, I think that survey subcommittee is a great idea. My question to that is though, how do we get to the focus of the survey, right? And what are we targeting? So is that going to be the job of the survey subcommittee, or is that the job of the committee? Right? Because the survey subcommittee to me is like working on the specific questions. But what are we targeting? We need a playground in Tuttletown, or right? Or are we looking at, we're focused on affordable housing or some other issues, right? So I guess, I agree with the mechanics of the survey subcommittee. How do we get to the meat of what we're asking and what we're looking for?
Why did you tell me, Bridget, that the last survey had about 120 questions?
109 questions,
Okay.
and it was an exact replica of the 2007 survey,
Right.
which we've all looked at, and way too many questions. And they could use some revision and some targets. I might suggest that we take what we've done, we take what Paul sends and kind of give it to a subcommittee, have them work with it. Maybe have them establish like a target number of questions. And come back to the full committee to figure that out.
I think, Bill, it has to be, or should be fairly broad-based at the outset. And yes, from the responses, you will then be still a few issues that are of particular importance to the residents, and then you may tailor the survey to those areas. But I think, unlike the survey that was done in 2014, which was actually the chart, it came from the charge of the council to the ad hoc committee. It was a very focused survey. The one that was done in 07 and repeated in 22,
Very open.
they were both very broad based.
And we could,
Also, you want to avoid what I call survey fatigue. So you don't want to, you want to make sure you at least get as much input as you can on a broad range of issues before people get tired of filling out forms and clicking boxes online. So that's my thought.
Well, maybe the survey committee is the way to filter that, right? So if we see data that suggests the answers really have changed a lot, then we can go after the questions that
Wouldn't
have
surprise
changed.
me.
So the survey is one piece of the outreach, right? And so I think also it's important for all of us to understand, it would be important for a subcommittee to focus on the survey design to understand the other outreach efforts, because the survey is not going to be the end all be all, right? But we need to figure out how that fits in. So I don't know if it makes sense to have more of an outreach committee or whatever word you use for
Outreach, yeah.
And the first thing that group tackles is the survey, but I think we all need to understand when we say engagement, what specifically do we mean by that?
Well, let's see. There's a certain order to these things. And I think going to the public broadly and saying, what would you like to see in a survey is going to prolong
Oh, that's not
the
what
issuance of a
that's not what I
survey
mean. No.
for quite some time. I would suggest doing the survey first. When the results are assembled and tabulated and so forth, then have a big public event of some type.
Oh, I meant internal alignment on what type of engagement activities we plan to do as part of this process. So a survey is one example. Are we doing public forums? And so that we understand, here are the different mechanisms for getting feedback from the community. So that helps us narrow in on how big of a survey does this need to be? How deep do we need to go on different topics? If we're going to do an entire in-person session on affordable housing, maybe we don't need to ask 70 questions about it on the survey. Maybe we do a quick hit. So it's more for our understanding of what we mean by engagement. I don't mean like ask them what they want us
Okay.
to ask.
I think there are going to be multiple public.
Right. But I'm not clear exactly on that. So I'm just saying, like, if we understood exactly.
I think
what
you
that
can
was like.
count on that.
So maybe the
Correct.
broader topic of endorsing the creation of subcommittees is to brainstorm what subcommittees do we believe we need to start off with, have a list of the subcommittees and we go, yeah, that's a good one. No, we don't need that subcommittee. And then go from there.
Yeah, I don't think we want to staff every one of them at this point.
No, but I think we should brainstorm a list
Yeah.
of subcommittees that we all think need to be formed in order to tackle all the nuts and bolts of what we need to do to get to a plan. And I think definitely one of them is the survey, obviously, but the larger topic is engagement. And is that, can those be two separate subcommittees? The larger topic of engagement and then people who are specifically getting, into the nuts and bolts of the survey.
Okay. Question, you can sort of rattle off a sample list of possible subcommittees. We could begin with that.
Yeah, so there is
Where
the
people want to go.
there is the sort of one possibly natural delineation would be off of the state checklist. for topic areas that thou must, that thou shall include in your plan. Obviously, I did hear that we have a member of the Historical Society. They might be a two, even better. So, even better. So there might be a natural proclivity, not to pigeonhole anybody, but they might be a good resource towards the history and historical resources of Cumberland. There are also more sort of biologically focused in terms of like wetlands and endangered species and critical habitat, undeveloped forest lands. That would sort of be another general bucket. There's also demographics and economics. I could see those being sort of in the same realm, but obviously this is all open to discussion and interpretation. This is the problem with not having a list in front of you. It'll come to me in a moment, but I think that there might be some natural, like, are you interested in preservation and development? Are you interested in history? Are you interested in engagements? We might be able to start sort of lumping folks into buckets there.
So I was looking at exercise 2 and the 2009 statement up there lends itself to a number of committees: the agricultural heritage, environmental sustainability, affordable housing, commercial development, growth, and planning. So we kind of haven't done the exercise, but it was kind of like, are you with the 2009? Does that make sense, or does the 2014 update make sense? And I kind of look at the, not poking holes, but 2014 doesn't really. I read that and I go, I have no idea what you guys want to do.
Yeah.
But 2009, I can read that and go, oh, got it. Get what you want to do, and therefore it lends itself to committees. Because it starts to target areas of interest within the community.
Do you want me to take a crack at some?
Yeah.
Economic development, housing choices, sustainability and resiliency.
Define, that's kind of buzzwords. What's sustainability and the other thing?
I think that's for you to define. I think I'm broad on purpose because to Christian's point, it could be a lot of the preservation. It could be low growth areas. It could be, I think I'm trying to keep them broad by design.
People's interaction with the environments.
I mean, to be clear, I'm throwing them, I'm trying to go way.
Well, everybody is talking about sustainability, that encompasses a lot of buzzwords and more, what does it mean for practical purposes for the resident of Cumberland?
That's right, you can read it. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I'm just trying to get, hey, what are those 6 big topics? Yeah, that's fair. I totally.
Yeah.
To Meg's point, I think outreach and engagement, communicate outreach and engagement is one, and their first task is the survey.
I wonder if after we do the engagement one, after that, I think we might want to consider making these subcommittees aligned to the sections of the
Yes.
plan.
100%.
Because if we just say, here's subcommittee, debate this, you're gonna have this robust debate and then find yourself in the same, no progress towards the plan. So I would, my inclination is to orient it around driving towards something.
100%. Yeah. And I would
Debate
think,
for the sake of debate.
Yeah. and for like a good, like what would the first working session work with, right? We could, in draft quality, of course, print out the old the most updated comprehensive plan. We could give each subcommittee a draft of that plan, give them a couple markers and some pens and say, have at it. Right. And so to your point, you're already taking the existing document and you're already trying to move it forward. So, but I'm trying not to interject all of my management vision on it, but there's a great example of that's how your subcommittee could get started.
Makes sense.
Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say, one thing I thought worked well on the housing task force, when we did our little subcommittees, they were like, fact-finding team. So a couple of us went and like researched what do the zoning rules of other towns look like around housing? And then came back and like presented to the whole group. And then we had that discussion. And that was really about this, I thought.
I hesitate to say this, but I feel like Paul and I are the yin and the yang. Hopefully we, offer it. So now that he's out of the room, I guess. I would just acknowledge too that as much as we will probably want to be making dramatic progress immediately, it is just worth acknowledging and giving ourselves a few moments, a few meetings to sort of get the lay of the land and suss out what we're interested in, what others are interested in, as we become more familiar with, the process that we're going to be going down. And so I think that Paul's idea of endorsing subcommittees, if we, need the subcommittees determined now, we can do that. But I think he was alluding to, is that a general path we can be going down? And so I think over the next couple meetings, it might be, as we sort of have looked at the state checklist and the Growth Management Act and talked about a vision statement, all of these things are going to be building off of one another. And it, for better or for worse, probably won't be until a few more meetings in that we really can say, this is our path forward. So don't feel pressure right now to have it all figured out. That's not the expectation. But I think the discussion of what buckets might they fall in and who might be interested in those kinds of things and how might they tie into a broader thing, that's a very, very, very helpful exercise.
It's also, Peter, you mentioned sustainability, and we have two from Lansing Conservation.
Yeah.
You have a subcommittee yourselves.
Yeah.
On sustainability. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel necessarily. We can find out where you are. If you've reached a certain midpoint, or even if I want to see what you've done. And
Yeah, a lot of it, like, just follow on to our climate action plan. So originally, a committee to develop our climate action plans, we developed or on the town's website. The sustainability committee is really just like, how do we get more people to install solar and heat pumps and use, less fossil fuels. Some of that stuff, which are all now in town ordinances. So a lot of that work's been done, which could hopefully be reflected in the plan and hopefully we keep moving those things forward. But yeah, a lot of it's like at the end stages, and we've already done all the work and the town's adopted those, and we have solar ordinances, yada, yada. So yeah, sustainability wise, I don't know how much there is to do. Like some towns have a lot of work to do and like need to put that in their plans, but yeah, I think a lot of ours is really land use and just how do we manage development and how do we, we've already done a good job there. We've already protected a huge amount, like more than 30% of Cumberland is already protected land. So yeah, sustainability, very buzzy, but we could make it mean like growing all our own food if we want. And then we've also done that work. We've identified all of the best farmland that are like, we should tell people not to build houses on this in case we need to farm it. So we could make it mean that. And
Well, I think like the environmental sustainability pieces cover really well with plans and conservation. But when you look at the other pieces of sustainability in terms of economics and equity, we could really have a deep conversation on what that looks like for Cumberland and where we want to take it. I think.
I think you make a really good point, Bridget, because I Jess here, sorry for what you say, but there's an assumption in that we want to protect more land. And, I think part of this process of the comp plan is digging in at those base assumptions and doing a gut check if they are valid or not. So, anybody on the conservation, conserve land is great, but maybe that's not in the root document necessarily. And I think we've got to roll back the assumption. But that's just what.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think we do kind of have to go back again to that 2007 plan on what the objectives were at that time. And and a huge thing was, again, that we wanted to get beachfront property. We wanted range, we wanted the Ryan's Forest, Knights Pond, Blueberry Hill, and again, Twin Brook. So I think we've got to be real careful when we get into this open thing, that a lot of those objectives and preservation of open land has been done, as you're saying, that may not be the primary thing. And the thing is, what is the public's appetite for purchase of public land after we've done a substantial amount? And what role now with the conservation subdivision thing where we're preserving 50% of any parcel? So I think as we go through this, we've got to, when we look at the 2009 plan, and 2014 was just son of 2009, that what has changed? And I think, as I said the last time, I mean, I don't know where we're going. I really don't. I mean, we've done so much of the previous plans, and I personally have no idea where we go from here.
Yeah, let's see, I think the survey would elicit them.
Yeah,
If you would ask sort of a 1-2 punch, do you favor the acquisition of more land? And number 2, are you willing to see your taxes go into the paper?
Right.
They say,
Well, and the flip side of that too is if you're not willing to pay the taxes, what services are you willing to give up to allow us to
yeah,
purchase them?
sure.
Because that's the other alternative. And I don't think people always think about that. There's like taxes. Okay, fine, we won't raise your taxes, but what do you not want us to provide you?
Yeah, exactly.
Which is a tougher choice for a lot of people.
It's very tough because 3/4 of our expenses are school related. So
Yeah.
the town piece rather small. Hey,
I mean, I love all of the open space, don't get me wrong. But I think that it's a mistake also to not, because you think about the literal taxes that you might have in order to acquire the land or retain the land. But you don't necessarily consider that not developing that land means that there's smaller tax base or, so there's pros and cons and there's
Right.
costs that are visible and costs that are invisible whenever you do these things. So it's a really complicated thing.
And there are unintended consequences for the zoning decisions that we've already made. If you pay attention to some of the planning board meetings, when the public comes out in force about, developments or whatnot, we hear about those unintended consequences a lot. And yeah, so it's interesting. It's an interesting conversation.
Understanding this is about land use, but it's beyond, it's a very Cumberland problem to be like, oh, let's buy another park. But Jesse did a tremendous job with the turf and getting the turf, and that's an environmental and a sustainable issue of putting in something that works. Falmouth has got ordinances for, not insecticides, but pesticides, thank you. We have 3 aquifers, 2 of which are incredibly vulnerable. One is very vulnerable that we have protections for. And we rejected the initial proposal, or didn't reject it, we're trying to get down considerably the recommendations. All of that is part of sustainability and not just what we're using the land, but what land we're buying for the latest park and you can let your dog run free. It's protecting the aquifer in West Cumberland, protecting the aquifer in the center, not the center, the other part of
One in
West
the center, yeah.
the east side of West Cumberland, and then the one in center, the center is less vulnerable. So there's other sustainability. The cooperation and collaboration that went into the turf field ordinance was astounding and something that has never happened in Cumberland as long as I have lived here. That the school board, the town council, the ordinance committee, and later the council, and the committee came together and came to that resolution was tremendous. So we can't look at it from a Cumberland perspective of what can we find next, but it also works into the fields and agriculture that was in the 2009 plan, preserving those, which isn't necessarily the town buys them for a park, and adds them to Twin Brooks. It's a way to preserve those farms and help them continue. So I don't think we can look at it just from, let's buy another park and do you want your taxes book to pay for it? But it does, Twin Brooks does enter into the, I know there's a use plan thing going blah, blah, but that should be a question. But my other part, I was going to say earlier, I agree with where it's been over here. Before we're coming up with questionnaire questions, I think we need to agree on what the buckets are. Like, are we asking questions about, you just said, the school is 70% of our tax base. Are there questions about that and looking at the structure of that? Are there questions about sustainability, aquifers? Are there questions about shared services, other things that fit into, as opposed to just, you know, do you want to add another 200 acres to Twin Brooks if you want your taxes lower? So I think we need to agree on affordable housing versus housing that's affordable for multiple demographics and different stages of life, blah, 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 before we start hammering up questions.
Maybe there's some homework that we have to do where we go through and we look at the questions ourselves and we come up with an analysis, our own analysis of what we think the data shows, right? And what out of those questions, what we see the major issues are. Because if we ask the same questions again, we're going to get largely the same answers.
And I think be interested to know what each of our
I think
thoughts
that,
on
I think
what we
that'd be
think
a
the
helpful
concerns are.
diverse
Yeah.
exercise to get something in.
Yeah,
Mr. Bailey.
I think that there's a lot more at play here than we really are thinking about. I think about the 2009 plan and I read the vision statement there and I frankly agree with a lot of what it says. I think the important thing that I want to bring out is how much the world has changed in the last 15 years. You know, I served on that, I was chair, he was vice chair of that plan. And the questions that we were asked then are so much important to ask again in light of this new world that we live in. And I think, we look at, 50% of the population didn't live here 10 years ago. So there's, these will be new questions that may be old to some of us, but the answers may be different. And we talked about the acquisition of public land and, you say, okay, well, how many more people will we add to our community in the next 10 years? And that means that recreation spaces become so much more important and the preservation of agricultural land. All these things are, I think that, if we sit back and we look and think what has happened in the last 15 years, we've had a pandemic that we none of us were prepared for. We're still Monday morning quarterbacking what we did and how we related to that. The world has changed dramatically. I think we have to approach this comp plan with our eyes wide open, because I think we're going to be surprised at some of the answers.
I just note we had a former planning board chair by the name of Mark Robinson. And at one of the meetings where the planning board was considering a development and a huge crowd of neighbors were there, and Mark said, if we listen to the views of the neighbors for every one of the developments that we've seen, half of you people wouldn't be living here.
I have a quick question, Bridget, this is probably for you. Do we have access to like rolling whiteboards or, the Post-it noted paper so that that we can have maybe, I think Christian, you kind of talked about brainstorming, like where we start to flesh this out and maybe we have a meeting like this again, but we self-divide and then everybody sits and says, okay, these are the subcommittees we think we should have. These are the topic areas I think that we need to be discussing and actually flush it out as a group and have that an exercise like that.
If whatever we need, I can get it.
Okay.
I'm sure we have it. And the other thing that I was thinking about for the survey is this just making sure too that we're addressing the needs of the comprehensive plan. So it's not a survey to just survey people. It's a survey to feed the comprehensive plan. And I don't know if anyone has noticed, but I have placed links on our page for the Cumberland's very first comprehensive plan that was completed in 1973, and it's short. And actually GT-COG helped with it. I don't know if you were aware of that history, but the 1973 Cumberland
I
Comprehensive
think Peter is.
Plan.
No?
Not that one, no.
89.
Oh, okay.
73, 81, 89, 95, 2009, 2014 was a little updated in 2015. But take a look. I was like, wow, this is still like, we still have some of these things. Like some of this stuff from over 50 years ago still applies and still makes sense. And we haven't figured it out from then, right? Like, and I think for me, it's like, is that our job? Are we gonna figure it out from 1973 or like what are we doing here that might be different, that might be more inspiring, that might lead to change? Although I'm also very familiar with the affordability housing report, of which you're right, nothing has happened, right? And so what do we take from history? What do we learn? What really has changed about Cumberland, and what do we want to change going forward?
I would just add on to, what Bob was saying about, yes, we have gone through a lot of change in 15 years. Feels, I'm sure to those of you who've been around a really long time, like, wow. But I think we would be deluding ourselves if we didn't imagine that the next 10 to 15 years is going to be change potentially. I think you just kind of have to prepare for that. You have to prepare for the reality that, demand for housing in Cumberland is not going to go down. Climate change is happening, and people, this tends to be a place that people think of as like buffer a little bit, obviously not immune, but so I just think that that's going to be one of the biggest challenges, is that like I say, with that change management, you have a population of people who likes it the way it's always been. Of course we all do. We love it the way it's always been, but it can't stay that way and also not become a haven for really wealthy people. Because that's just where we're headed. We're not, allowing enough people to live here to, bring housing prices down. And so it's just so many people competing for only so many properties available. So it's the same old story of already, but yeah. Something to keep in mind.
Anthony.
So I have a process and a content question for Paul and Christian, and I'm going back to what I scribbled down from the presentation of the need to understanding better the existing zoning, which is will benefit from, and then also what you all provide, which is analysis of the cost of service as a result of zoning. I raise that because the comprehensive planning group is going to be compiling a lot of information and getting a lot of feedback, which we then are going to mold into, pursuant to the requirements of the comprehensive plan model recommendation. But buttressing those recommendations, I think, is that analysis of cost of service to the degree that it's relevant. But my question to you is that correct? Because I think our recommendations need to be grounded in reality and potential costs. But I know it's a comprehensive plan. We're not going to the nth degree gathering details. And there's many other processes in the future by the town planning board and town council that will develop these further. Do you see where I'm going with that? I'm just trying to understand what level of detail and analysis are we going to overlay with the information we're compiling to then have a product.
Yeah.
Paul, we actually voted you off the island when you left.
Oh, sweet.
I've been looking for, yeah.
I got something if you want to go.
No, please, that'd be great.
Okay. I mean, I think the cost to clarify the cost to serve on, because it was in our, it's in our proposal to you.
Yeah.
A little bit of context for that is that we have completed that process with Freeport and Guam. And we've had 5 other communities sign up to do it. And it's just been very beneficial because what it does is it helps level set conversations and everybody speaking the same language, right? So we all know good or bad, there's a lot of whataboutism in local politics, right? Because if one question's answered, then it's on to the next one, right? So all that exercises to do was to help inform this committee of some of the, like, just the financial, like, hey, we can agree on X, Y, and Z and move forward. How much of that makes it into your plan, I think, is up to you. It's not a requirement. I think it's a reaction for us. It's us being out on the street, dealing with all our communities, and it's something that's just been clamored for. Because it then hopefully it cuts through the noise of this is gonna cost, this is gonna raise my taxes, or this isn't gonna raise my taxes, or there's gonna be 10 kids here, or there's gonna be 2 kids here. So all we're gonna provide to you is that information as unbiased and dispassionate as possible. How much you layer that into the comp plan is not a requirement. I think it's something that is appealing to a lot of our communities right now and helps the decision-making process. So I suspect we'll have something for you on the earlier side of this process. And you guys, like everything else, you can say, oh, wow, let's sink our teeth into this and maybe reference it. It's not a requirement. It's almost like an add-on because it's such a high request from our end. When we were trying to sell you on this, we were saying, I bet you this would be useful. So that's my part for the cost to serve. Yeah.
Okay, just a quick follow-up. I would hope that the comprehensive plan and the committee and the public would put their best foot forward without regard to cost. What is your vision for the community? The reality will always kick us in the teeth at some point, but we should always have we should always strive for greatness.
And it is an aspirational document. So I'd echo what Bob says. If it ends up being, into your comments earlier, if it ends up being aspirational heavy and not necessarily grounded in a fiscal analysis, that's okay. Right? It's just something that we can provide. And we will provide.
To that end, if we're going after the aspirations of the community, I think we have to make sure we're reflecting the community. I mean, there's getting a sense from the room that change is coming. We got to bake that into the plan. Well, what if the majority of the community says, well, I'm not really interested in change? We cannot push forward a plan that is a minority viewpoint, whatever that minority viewpoint is. So to me, it goes back to questioning the base assumptions and not giving kind of ourselves some process.
The other lens that can sometimes be helpful in this, and I think it gets back to Nancy's question, is Bridget was talking about, you can go back to the 1973 plan and see questions that were raised that have not been satisfactorily answered, or questions that were raised that maybe had an answer but haven't been addressed in a way that is. So one of the lenses that you can use to think about your current comprehensive plan is what didn't get accomplished and why, or how could we better address this thing that there seems to be a consistent, like maybe the community has repeatedly over and over and over again said the following X, Y, and Z things. But if why keeps not getting addressed, can this plan do it differently? Is that an impossible question? So it's always going to be a chicken and the egg of, it's better to know more when you're starting to plan out your process, but at some time you need to start going down a path and then just let yourself be informed. So it's just a constant give and take. And I think the one thing that I would reiterate from the earlier comment is it's okay to suss it out for a few meetings. Like, we don't need to have a plan tomorrow, that's okay.
Someone asked, what the buckets would be and so forth. Paul, can you go back to your slide on the April 10 meeting, our next scheduled group meeting?
The other thing too is we've done things in our comprehensive plan, taken action from them, and they've since failed, right? So we've implemented programs, specifically, I'm thinking of the community garden, but I know there's been others. Comprehensive plans that we need a community garden, tried it at Twin Brook, absolute disaster, never doing it again, right? So we want to take that, I mean, this is what I've learned. We want to take that and not repeat that. We want to be aware about what happened in the past, know if we did anything, and I have some records on that and like what we've accomplished and what we've accomplished since stopped working. And you know, so as we get into it, we'll have all that insight too.
Sure. Yeah. An example of that is our ocean front access.
Yeah.
That went to referendum and passed by Westbrook, we passed, and we now have it, and it's town on property, so. A slight difference in the other direction would have meant that it was still a front burner issue. Why you don't need a coastal town without public access?
Yeah.
We solved that. Yeah. Well, Paul, I just wanted to draw the group's attention to your suggestion for, at least part of our next meeting will be all about it, and especially the state's growth management act. Would in fact tell us what the buckets are for state law. I think that might be useful for folks to know. Literally item by item. And also, I just while I'm rambling here, Nancy, you mentioned zoning, and how strong do people feel about how well they understand the zone and the zoning ordinance? Is it worth a special, in quotes, workshop meeting for us to do off the sort of off schedule to cover that topic? We have the map, but the ordinance is how many pages long?
I think we can still cover it like on schedule too. We could put it in our next meeting. We don't have to do subcommittee right away.
Yeah.
You know, we
Yeah.
can start that in May or something.
That's true.
While we maybe have some target educational pieces like zoning, which I can cover. Maybe we can bring in our code enforcement officer, the expert.
Yeah, I actually think our original slide said starting in May, but we didn't put it in May, so yeah, so, I mean, that's.
Zoning is down, I mean, zoning is what it is when it, because it does affect affordable housing, it affects agriculture. So, yeah, I think it's a good thing for everybody to be educated on the zones, because everything we do in every aspect, the zone covers what you can do and what you can't do.
Right, then, so two big topics for the next meeting would be the requirements in the State Growth Management Act and what is our local zoning all about, which is consist of an analysis of the map and pertinent portions of the zoning work. You don't need to read the whole thing, but we need to have conceptions of what permitted uses are, what special exceptions are, what uses can't be allowed in certain parts of town, what can be.
Yeah,
Because if you go into that blind, someone's gonna catch that problem. So
It'll also be interesting to understand the definition of things like tree growth and open space. It's like kind of part and parcel of those designations. And
yeah, that's tax law, but property tax law. But yeah, that's useful.
We can do that too.
I would think that we could start with an outreach and engagement subcommittee,
Probably smart.
right away. And I'll share with Bridget and I met since we last met the group and thought in terms of a 4 to 6 week window for the survey, in which the survey will take place. And I think we had a common end date, which was June 30. Theory being, rather than string it out over several month period of time, do it in fairly short period of time, get a reliable snapshot of where people are, where they're coming from, and yes, their thoughts may change. And not everybody will fill it out. And a lot of people will come to our meetings who will not have filled it out, or who will have since changed their minds, but whose opinions are just as valid as every person who filled out the survey. And somehow we have to meld all of them. It's a work in progress. Let me try for show of hands of volunteers to work on the outreach and engagement. You want to, you
Keep your hands up, people.
Here's the second guy.
Yeah.
I got,
It's not a skill set of mine.
Good to know yourself.
so I have Bill, Meg, Kathy, Evan, and Steve. Did I miss anyone? Okay, you can put your hand there.
Do you want one of us to staff that? Like, do you want one of us to be on an email chain with that or?
Yeah.
Let's see.
I think we should.
Maybe so.
Yes.
Bridget and I just chatted about that, and also
We'll stand by.
whether we,
You can get Whitney
as a
too.
subcommittee,
Oh.
meet sooner than April 10th, which probably we should.
Bridget always.
And anyway, and from the April 10 meeting, I think the need for which further subcommittees will become more apparent as we know and understand what state law requires. And they aren't necessarily standing subcommittees. They may have short-term assignments and then, new ones will form as we progress. Let's see. Other questions or topics tonight?
Are we still on number D for our agenda?
Oh, beats me, haven't I? Let's see. Well, I think we sort of slid to E without expressly saying so.
Oh, good. I just had something, but I want to make sure I put it in the right.
Go ahead.
So I feel very strongly about doing stuff to move all this forward. And I think, can you put up your map activity? Sorry. I really think that today, tomorrow, sometime soon, that this is an exercise that we should start with, not just with us, but with the town. Because this is something very simple that we can put out. It can be passive, and it can either be, well, I think we do it two ways. One, we have the online GIS map where anyone can log in, and then we follow it up in 2 weeks probably with an in-person mapping session here, an in-person mapping session in West Cumberland, and I don't know where the schoolhouse is in Forsyth, so.
Schoolhouse?
Well, I was thinking the West Cumberland Community Center, somewhere people can come. Because that way, the people that don't have access or aren't great on the internet can come and just, I really like that idea. Come put sticky notes on a map. It's a good way to start getting people engaged. It's not a long activity where you're going to get survey burnout. And then before you even have had to finish your survey questions, you already have some ideas of what people are thinking. So
On your schoolhouse point, I have been to a very small number of public meetings at the Forsyth Community Church in the basement. That was years ago, whether or not that's still available or not.
What about Tuttle?
They had suggested sticking with sort of passive and leaving surveys in various places like at town hall in the library. That way we're not like getting people to a specific place at a specific time, and then we kind of don't have a lot of answers about the comprehensive.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I just thought, I was just trying to think of how people that, like.
Can we use the
people that are-
flash code and ask the question? Tell us about your neighborhood and one thing you like about it. Or, you know, where do you live and, you know, what's your neighborhood and what do you like about it? Just, I don't know, you know what I mean? They can't point, but you don't want them to go into a long dissertation about their neighborhood. Maybe it's just, tell us one thing you like about your neighborhood.
One thing about, one
Yeah.
consideration about taking our show on the road is that I don't think we have the capability to record at remote locations.
We have internet, I can record through these gadgets.
Elsewhere, that's like the West Cumberland Rock Hall.
And I can get more of these if we have separate.
Do you need to record a workshop if you're just going out and asking people to put something on a sticky note?
No.
No, but like subcommittees, if we're gonna meet separately as subcommittees, maybe just someone needs to just be a note taker. And we don't need to record these, we need to just kind of have minutes.
And also it sounds, just riffing on that, it sounds like if you each had 15 paper copies of a map or an exercise and in your day-to-day lives happened to come across folks that you felt might want to weigh in, that's, that is another way. That wouldn't have to be a formal meeting, but it is input that you can all collect along the way.
And I would say if GPCOG did a charrette tomorrow, it would involve out of the box charrettes or maps, visual preference surveys. Here's a picture of many different housing types. Put a red sticker on the one that you think is a monstrosity, right? So I'm not saying that's what we do, but like if you just asked us to do it tomorrow, we would be doing those interactive sticky notes and then the visual preference surveys.
Yeah, I think it would sort of be interesting to take this map and just say, and not limit responses to one response per person, but just drop a pin on the map. What do you like about this? What do you not like about this? Because like in my mind would be like, I want to drop a pin on Route 9 and say, I want to raise the road here. So every time it floods, it doesn't cut off, could be anything that, and it's not limited by, like housing type. We could get people to start to get engaged without getting too deep. When you start to do the pictures of the housing, now we're talking about survey fatigue and this is just sort of welcome. We kicked off the comprehensive plan committee. We're just putting feelers out. What do you like? What don't you like? What would you improve? That's all. Just a thought.
Yeah, I think it's an amazing idea. I think don't take paper copies, just put it online, right? And then see how many people fill it out and where they live, right? Because then you'll have a very good idea of who's going to fill out the survey, right? Like, this is the lowest barrier to entry. Like, who reads the crier? We'll click a link, drop a pin, and spend 5 minutes writing about their neighborhood. And then you will see where are the very motivated people in town, who are the 30% that are most likely to fill out the survey, and we will represent. And if we want to reach out to people who are less likely to get, you'll see what areas of town do people live who aren't going to fill out our survey. It's sent over email on the crier, and maybe where we might want to knock on some doors, asking to come out to an event or whatever. But I like that, and it just gives us some basic information about people love this about our town or this about their neighborhood, and just I think it's a great idea. It's a low effort early touch point, and see how many people in town are going to be engaged in some way, and if there's dead zones in town where nobody's going to bother, or maybe it's a little bit everywhere, which would be amazing, right? Because then it's okay, people from all over town maybe are going to be engaged.
One thing that Bridget and I talked about is a sort of come your way soon postcard, which would be mailed to every property in town and say, starting a survey on such a date and on this date will be available by these various methods and so forth. So everybody gets a good heads up.
Yeah.
That it's coming.
Yes.
And look for it. It'll be available online. Not everybody has a computer, and for those, it's can be done on paper. Yeah. But so that'll be part of our, how we kick this thing off.
Survey engagement committee.
We honor that, the engagement committee.
Yeah, I love it. I agree. I think it's very low entry and we get a big bang for our buck. I mean, there's not a lot of effort on our part, but we're gonna get feedback.
And it'll raise awareness that like, oh, they're doing a comprehensive plan coming soon, like, oh, they're starting to think about it, like, oh,
Right.
I hate this, and I need to come to one of the meetings and tell people. They better not get rid of it. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, we've already had people be like, oh, you're on the comprehensive planning committee, let me tell you about like build housing on the golf course, because why am I paying for golfers? And I've had somebody else who's like, you get rid of the golf course, people will come and murder you. So, like, you know, people once they hear, like, want to get engaged one way or the other, which is nice, it's exciting, but like, that people being like, tell you that they care about the comprehensive plan. I was like, you care.
One thing that can be done, Paul, is that you can, through Bridget, circulate those two examples of
Yep.
surveys. that you-
Yep, that's my homework. Yeah.
And Bridget and Vern can forward them to the members of the engagement committee.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. That will be my workflow. I will work through Bridget. So you won't get anything to all of you. Bridget is my contact person. So I will, my homework is by next Tuesday to have at least 2 examples for you guys. Okay.
Other new business, old business?
We have just, I sent everyone responses to Kathy's email, with questions. I don't know if we want to chat about that or do we want to right here?
You want
No. I mean, I have printed out copies. It's also in your email. If there's anything you want to address in front of the committee on the questions, or if you want to follow up with me afterwards.
Well, I was gonna follow up with you. I was just, thinking about my West Cumberland area. And because, for instance, we've got a good sized river going through it, which a lot of people fish. But, I don't know the law on how far a landowner needs to stay away from that river. And, I think right now we have a small greenhouse going on at the bottom of Planted Road by the fairgrounds, the 2 hills. They're not that far from the river. I grew up working in greenhouses and, you use pesticides. And the state does come and visit you and see what's going on, as you probably know. But I don't know what they're using.
Aren't they organic farmers?
I think so.
I keep going up the hill, that
Yeah.
little farm.
I don't know. Does the town actually know what they're using, Should we have walking trails along those rivers?
Private properties.
Huh?
It's private property.
That's what I thought, but I didn't know, is there a ruling or ordinance on how far they gotta stay from?
Oh, yeah. It's a setback for
Maybe we
bodies of water, yeah.
Maybe we do some of that. There are answers in here in what I sent you, and I can give you the paper copy. Like places, good places to start, and then there's answers to some of your questions in here, and then we could probably do like a planning 101 subdivision development kind of 101 thing, right?
Right.
Would that be helpful with zoning?
Because you've got
Yeah,
big
yeah.
property owners still. But, they're getting along in age. I think of my own cousins that are in their 80s and own commercial property. And, I think of Allen's Farm, my parents owned 8 pieces of property across the street that we rented and stuff, but when you start paying the state taxes, it's a different story. You start selling off some of that stuff. And because it nails you hard on the state taxes. And, it's reality of what will happen once these people get older and what their kids are gonna do with something. And I was just curious, how many people do we still have? You know, for big property owners, or has it been chopped up a lot already?
We have a lot.
I,
Yeah.
you know,
The Conservation Commission has done work with large land.
They have.
Although I don't know what your definition of large is. In terms of acre.
50 or more acres.
well,
They've done
Yeah.
programs right here in this room.
They actually just recently an open house for large landowners. I actually wasn't there. I don't know if you were, but it was, the idea was to just, here's resources. You want to be in tree growth, if you want to know what the town is doing to help you, should you want access to that. So there is outreach. But I don't know.
yeah, you know, we used to have tree farms like Garsos and Hilton's and a lot of those older, actually selectmen back then had, you know, for preservation. Is anybody thinking about that, you know, big tree farms anymore? Cause, you know, you got a tax break when you did, so, yeah, I think about, you know, Allen's Farm, you know, we had 45 acres right there. And we also had another 40-acre tract on Upper Blanchard Road. And that's all housing now that we ended up selling. Just here and in my relatives are the Koch families, which are big landholders. And I think of Ronnie and Alvin, they're in the early 80s now. Howell is 70. Some of our Koch family were all in, a lot of them are in business, but some of them have taken it to the town of Gray. I can think of 4 of them just done that. So it's starting to get limited on commercial property of West Cumberland.
I'm sorry, what's limited? Because it's zoned
Well,
for commercial.
I know, but who owns it?
Well, Kathy, if I can draw out a thread that I think connects to a couple other comments
Yeah.
before. I think one of the broader questions you're asking, and Bridget has gotten into some of the specifics, but is there a way? You already alluded to the fact that 30% of Cumberland is, you know, already in conservation, which is amazing. That's a huge percentage. It sounds like there is a concern over in the near future are the largest sort of unbroken up tracts of lands. Are those the areas that are generally conserved? If they're not, we should be aware of the fact that it's entirely possible they will get broken up in the near future.
Right.
If that is a good thing, or I mean, this is a value neutral, you know, statement coming from me. If that's a good thing in the eyes of the committee, fine. If it's not a good thing in the eyes of the committee, then that's when we start thinking towards town policies that might say, maybe we do need more preservation or conservation targeted across these areas. And so that all of these things are informing one another, and hopefully with that lens of over the next 10 years, what are the particular things that we can have an impact on and that we're going to have to be worried.
But you also have a opposite side of landowner rights, and I think as we talk about all this stuff, that landowners still have some rights. I mean, we're in our 80s and have about 90 acres here in Cumberland. And we're gonna, as Kathy said, we're gonna have to sort out what we're gonna do. Right across the road, they're just gonna be building 8 $2 million houses. So it's land use is key, but you also have to understand the property owners have rights also.
Yes.
Maybe we could potentially have Penny from the Land Trust come in, because I know they've done a fair bit of research on and outreach to people just to, I don't want to speak for them, but they've basically gone out to a lot of these folks and said, hey, should you want to conserve your land? We're interested as an option. You know, as Peter said, they got landowners got the person, but they proactively put that out there as one option.
It might be useful for the zoning talk, just to take a quick look at the, I mean, it's one of the maps, the town on lands, tree growth lands. I mean, just to see like, this tree growth or like, you know, the tax use programs, just to see which pieces of land are either conserved or in tree growth with some sort of protection where there's a tax hit if you take it out, so they're not permanently conserved, but I mean, just because then you get a sense of like just how much of Cumberland is at present not developable, right? Because then you can kind of see like, no matter what the zoning is, there's like, you know, the Rhines and then the Watson Woods that's gonna get attached to it. It's like a 500 acre chunk. Like a big green chunk in the bottom middle is like, no one's ever gonna build a house there. It's all in conservation, so. So we need to think of that, right? It's like zoning doesn't matter if all of it's in conservation, because you can't build a house on it. So, yeah, I think that's like a big picture thing, like what are the pieces of land that are already protected? What are the big chunks of land someone could sell tomorrow and a developer could come in and put however many houses they can fit to get away with, right? So then we can do a visioning exercise of like, what if they built on every developable piece of land, and what would that look like? Is that what people in Cumberland want? Maybe it goes to the survey or whatever.
So back in 2009, I got on Facebook and I created West Cumberland Community Club. And we do actually a lot of advertising on there for our community businesses, what's going on in town, what might be happening here. But I put out a bit of a survey like a week ago myself, but I put myself in my cousin's shoes, the Cobb family. Okay. Now, some of the tracks, because they just sold some to a Rusty Land. They still own somewhere, Stratton's Hardware was across the street from Bud's Golf. Well, it's not golf anymore. There's a big tract of land which 3 or 4 of the brothers are all involved in. It's 3 or 4 brothers all involved in each piece here. So I'm putting myself in their shoes and saying, you know, you own a lot of land. I'm getting old. I want to start getting a realtor involved, which they already did for the Rusty Land. So how do we know if something isn't going on already this summer, you know? And so I decided to say, what would I like to tell the realtor, what I would like to see for business to come into town? So I probably got almost 50 responses, but within a week, it all started to calm down. But what I knew was that some of my cousins' wives were on that group. So one of them, I knew she had a bakery up there to Gray by Howell's wife. And I noticed that she was doing a thumbs up for a bakery. You know, somebody suggested we should have a bakery over there. Place for the seniors to go and hang out. And well, there's a lot of different things. But within a week, it started to calm down. And finally, my cousin Howell came on. And he was very interested in what we was thinking about. Because he's going to plan to develop something. He's involved with all that. He owns that ice cream shop land. He's got a nephew running it, you know. But there's a good piece right across from Bud's that what's going on there.
Kathy, I'm not sure where you're going with this, because
I'm trying to,
the whole corridor has been zoned for various commercial uses.
I
The
know,
cafe could go anywhere.
that's right.
All it takes is someone who wants to.
My intent was I wanted my cousins to see what the community would like to see. So we got some answers,
Okay,
some good ideas, what they needed, not wants, needed for businesses over there.
okay, well,
So I've already started some outreach,
Yep.
just so you know. But my thought is somebody should create something for the center of the town, not just that Cumberland and North Yarmouth. It should be just Cumberland only. Something on the Forsyth should be started to find out what they really want along Route 1. You know, it would be helpful, I think. Just
Well,
People,
the
people
survey
will
will-
engage, I think, better. Okay, is my thought.
Maybe that question for Tom.
it's Jen.
To further what I think she's saying, it's like, yes, it's zoned for commercial. We know it's zoned for commercial, it's been zoned for commercial forever. We have 3 gas stations in a half mile, yay Cumberland. There's even, our former town manager will say, it's been haphazard and by chance development. Reaching out to the community to see what they want, for sure, like, we don't want these little bakeries and coffee shops, every zone will tell you that. But the town had, the money from the TIF zone goes into the development of the TIF zone. Could part of the plan be? There is apparently a Falmouth Cumberland Chamber of Commerce, never seen the maximum town, even the Falmouth all the time. Should there be a board of, or suggestions be a board of realtors and landowners and developers, one developer, not a whole committee of Bob, to talk about, you look at something like Pineland, which was out of the way, who's gonna build there, why would any business want to go there? They had a plan, they had a structure, they had a committee, they had a huge effort to bring people in there, not just sitting back and going, yeah, our doors are open, let's see who comes in, which is what we've done traditionally on Route 1. Now Route 1 is pretty much done, so now it's Route 100. Are we going to sit back and wait for, we've got 3 cannabis shops and 3 gas stations. Do we need a more concerted effort? Should part of our plan be, we suggested to the town, they create this board and the board does this, and there's funding behind the board, which is funded by the TIF zone because it goes into blah, 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 blah. So it's not just stuff that happens, yes. And what a landowner wants to do.
Highland is a single owner though. So that's one owner deciding what they're gonna do on their land.
No, I
But-
totally
but-
agree.
But on that corner in West Cumberland, you got a whole bunch of different owners. And so if one owner wants to use their property for a certain thing and it's within zoning, you know, we can't stop them from building a 4 gas station.
No,
So I know you don't
disagree
want
with
it, but I mean, that's.
But the
that's
town
kinda how
could
it
do
goes.
something to, I mean, I am the one on the Facebook page going, look at what Cumberland House is doing. Never seen the town, the only time I've ever seen Cumberland doing it is Rusty Lantern. I am the one saying about Skillins, here's the sale, look what they're doing. We need, if we all say in every survey, you know, every survey is gonna say, we need more of a corporate tax base, we need to take pressure off single homes, property taxpayers, blah, 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 blah. Is there more the town can do to facilitate that, to make the town attractive, to market it? I've talked to, but I had a long talk with Matt about it. Give West Cumberland its own zip code, because any business goes in there, it says Cumberland Center, which is not accurate at all.
Maybe Jana, maybe.
Rebrand the town, like there's all sorts, to have a more marketing business focus, to assist the landowners who are interested in developing, to bring in attractive business.
Okay, so let's leave it right there, and maybe those are some questions that we can incorporate into our survey. You know, what is the level of involvement that you would like to see your town in moving forward to facilitate commercial business on the Route 100 corridor? I think No, we can belabor this all night. I think those are some questions that we could ask. In a survey. Just for history purposes, early in his tenure as town manager, Bill Shane created the Cumberland, Maine Business Association, CMBA,
Yes.
which kicked off with a big gathering at Valhalla. And then came a series of follow-up meetings, and the attendance dropped, and finally, nobody came. But the reality remains that good-sized portions of them are zoned for a broad variety of non-residential uses, and
It's a
go
business
for it.
decision.
Yeah.
I mean, fundamentally.
Yeah.
We can, 5 coffee shops.
We are zoned,
In
we are
West
zoned
Cumberland, but
for a McDonald's on Route 1. But nobody is gonna invest in building one because nobody drives the road.
it doesn't make business sense. I mean,
That's right.
the bottom line is, if you're gonna build a commercial entity, you wanna make money. That's why you do it. And if you're not gonna make money in West Cumberland, you're not gonna build it. Period. Whether the town of Cumberland advertises we're open and we're gonna help and we have grants or whatever we could do, it's still, if it doesn't make sense for a business to build. So I agree. I think the survey is a great place to pull the string on how much involvement does the town engage in, to make those things happen.
But I think
But
tax
when you-
surveys are
when you think of
concentrated
town,
on what you want, which is two
Remember
things.
that a very, very important committee of the town just recently held a major event right here to make all the resources available to the large, to them, spread the word.
Yeah.
And that's not the first time it's happened. So,
So part of our surveying should be of corporations too. Why do they not want to? We have very successful businesses in Cumberland. Cops are one of them, but what is their opinion? Who know better than any of us? Why don't other businesses want to come here? I know Maple says that Maple's a bad example, she has connections to New Gloucester, but why did she go from Yarmouth to New Gloucester? What's the fact of New Gloucester? Why would she not have come here? Why are there businesses further up Route 100 on Bray, but not us? We're literally the midpoint between two exits. So asking all of the business owners, not just property tax
That
owners.
was in Yarmouth. And she no longer exists. She's completely out of business.
Right, but she initially moved up to New Gloucester.
Yeah.
And now I think she's doing an event.
Yeah. But that was a business decision and it didn't work out for her and she's no longer in business.
I believe she had family issues. There was also a brewery that moved up to New Gloucester, but New Gloucester is not exactly a writing chocolate either.
really getting into the weeds here.
Yeah.
As individuals, business choices,
Yeah.
we should have zoning that, is as flexible as possible, given the needs of the community and desires of the residents. After that, you're on your own. That might take. But we'll see what the survey, what we get with the reach on it. We are past the 2 hour mark, which I think is probably good for one night. We'll get together again on the 10th of April, joined by our colleagues. We can talk about theory. And we'll pursue state growth management act and also the zoning issues, the map zones. Okay. So you folks. Thanks a lot.
Steve, will not be here at the